Okay, welcome everybody. This is, in case you were wondering, this is the event about energy efficiency in the tri-state area. Connecticut, though, is not going to be here for a while because I understand they're stuck in traffic. And so Jonathan Schrag, who actually used to work here at the Lenfest Energy Center, will be a little delayed, but I will still introduce him. My name's Steve Cohen. I'm Executive Director of the Earth Institute, and I'm the professor. I'm a professor at the School of International and Public Affairs, and I run the Masters of Environmental Science and Policy program at NYPA and the Masters in Sustainability Management program at the School of Continuing Education. I've done a little bit of writing here and there on issues of sustainability. So I want to introduce to you our all-star panel. And then we're going to start on really a conversation. There won't be any set presentations. I'm going to play Oprah and ask these guys some questions. So let me start by introducing Jill Anderson, who is the Director of Business Integration at the New York Power Authority, where she supports day-to-day operations as Chief of Staff and oversees energy policy, the sustainability program, and initiatives in energy efficiency. That must be why you're here today. Prior to that, she worked as the Director of Supply Acquisition and Renewable Energy for NYPA, working on power supply acquisition projects, including land-based and offshore wind, biomass, solar, and other renewable sources. Before she worked at NYPA, she worked at the Hess Company, and so she knows a little bit about the energy industry. So, Jill, thank you for joining us. Seated immediately next to Jill is Rebecca Kraft, who is the Director of Energy Efficiency and Demand Management at Con Edison. And if you don't know, Con Edison is why we have the lights on here today, otherwise there'd be no lights. So thank you for the lights, Rebecca, and for all the other energy we use here. She is responsible for the development, implementation, and management of energy efficiency, demand response, and peak demand programs for the company's electric and gas systems. Ms. Kraft also manages the company's account executives and market research. In earlier roles at Con Edison, Ms. Kraft developed the company's policies regarding the wholesale electric and gas markets. Before joining Con Ed, Ms. Kraft spent more than 11 years at Prudential Financial in a variety of positions in international managed assets. Seated next to Rebecca is Luke Falk, who is also one of my colleagues on the faculty here teaching in energy efficiency. He is now the sustainability manager at the Related companies, where he supports the implementation of Related's corporate sustainability strategy. This includes a focus on enhancing the energy performance of new and existing buildings, benchmarking, monitoring and verification, managing LEED certification, and the incorporation of innovative technologies. Prior to joining Related, Luke was a project manager for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. In that capacity, he managed NYSERDA's suite of statewide energy efficiency and green building programs that targeted the multifamily housing market. So Luke is an old friend, and welcome back. Now, seated next to him will be Jonathan Schrag, who is stuck in traffic. This is why you never want to live in Connecticut. It's always better to live here. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, that's where Jonathan Schrag is the Deputy Commissioner of Energy for the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and has served as the Executive Director of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative for the past 3 years. He is a former partner of Hudson Strategic Energy Advisors, where he worked with the state governments of Wyoming, West Virginia, and Montana. And from 2005 to 2007, he worked here as the Executive Director of the Lenfest Center for Sustainable Energy, which is part of the Earth Institute. And so when he arrives here, they're going to rush him to the stage, and everybody should stop what they're doing and applaud him just to embarrass him a little bit, okay? So I'm counting on you for that when the time comes. Okay, seated next to where Jonathan will be is John Williams. John is the Director of Energy Analysis at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, known to most of you as NYSERDA, and he leads NYSERDA's efforts with respect to the New York State Energy Plan. In addition, he oversees the state's fuels, data collection and reporting activities emergency planning, energy price forecasting and systems modeling, and a wide variety of other things. Previously, John served as deputy counsel and helped develop aspects of NYSERDA's role in the state's carbon dioxide cap and trade program and the regional greenhouse gas initiative. So John, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And sitting next to him is Michael Winka, who is from New Jersey, the place I was born in. So don't say anything bad about New Jersey.
You got here easily.
And you got here very easily. Michael is the director of the Office of Clean Energy at the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, where he's responsible for promoting energy efficiency, clean energy generation, and renewable energy generation through the various regulatory and non-regulatory tools that the agency has. He assisted in the development of Jersey's solar program and the transition from solar rebates to the New Jersey Solar Renewable Energy Certificate Financing Program. He worked for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for 22 years before working on these clean energy issues. So that is the panel that we have here today, some of our region's experts on energy efficiency. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, work my way down the panel by just asking everybody to just briefly answer a few questions. Let's start with this first one, which is, what is your organization's approach and unique set of programs related to energy efficiency? What kinds of energy efficiency programs have you guys implemented? Jill?
So for those of you who might not be familiar, the New York Power Authority is a public benefit corporation. We're an entity of the state of New York. We don't accept any taxpayer funding. All of our funding comes from the sale of our generating assets into the market. So we're a generation and transmission owner across New York State. New York Power Authority has the legislative authority to do work with public entities in New York. So our work is confined to city and states, municipalities, public, and then also not-for-profit education and schools. So what our programs are targeting at that customer base is to provide very low-cost financing over long-term payback, where the investments are paid back through sharing of the savings. So usually it's a 50-50 split between paying back the loan that they've taken out from NYPA, and then basically they're financing it through their utility bills. We've done a wide variety of projects. We do HVAC upgrades, windows, insulation, building controls. Lighting, of course, is a huge part of the work that we do. And then also we integrate renewable energy into our program. So in addition to financing of the typical types of investments to reduce consumption, NYPA has several grant programs where we will then, in addition to that project, also then install like PV solar on the roof or other applications that make sense, and that would be through a grant, and so then it's an additional bonus to the entity that we're doing work with.
Okay, Rebecca, how about Con Ed? What are you guys up to in energy efficiency?
We have a whole series of programs that I'll classify as demand management more generally. We spend about $100 million a year for gas and electric energy efficiency programs, where we give incentives to customers to implement projects that either reduce their electric use or their gas use. We also have, and that's for customers across all market segments, large, small, commercial, residential, the two large industrial customers we have in New York. We also have demand response programs that are fairly typical contingency-based programs, and it is a program that's fairly similar to that of the New York Independent System Operator. So we can ask our customers to reduce their demand when there is a contingency on the system. We also have three sets of programs which are which are more unique but fall into those categories. The first is that we have something called peak shaving, which is a little like demand response, but we call that program and we ask our customers to reduce their use upon the occurrence of an event that's not a contingency. And in our case, we look at the next day's system forecast, and if on day one that next day's forecast is in excess of a certain amount, we will tell our customers who participate in this program to turn down their use the next day. We have something called a targeted demand-side management program, and that is a program we've had for a number of years where we use what you probably think of as energy efficiency, but we focus on getting that efficiency during certain hours of the day to actually reduce our capital spend, and we do that by matching our activities to projects. So if we need, for example, to add a transformer in a certain geographic area because there is an overload on the system, we go out and try to reduce demand in that area by the time we need the transformer. And the third thing we started last year was a residential air conditioner program that is a demand response program, but not geared towards central air conditioning. Central air conditioning programs, control of those, very common across the United States, mostly in the South and the Southwest. We have a huge proliferation of room air conditioners in New York City, the largest plurality in the country. And we think we can build a demand response program around controlling that plug load and other plug load. So that's the programmatic piece of what we do. The other very unique piece of what we do is we forecast all of our demand management into our long-term peak demand forecasts. Peak demand is how utilities build their system. That's how we spend our money, plan our capital spend. So we look out 10 years and we look at demand growth. That's about a little over 1%. The next 10 years, what we see. That has been reduced by about 0.4% because of the demand management measures that we think we will get in place, that we think NYPA will get in place, and that we think NYSERDA will get in place, and also New York City for things that it is doing outside of programs.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So Luke, what is the related company doing on energy efficiency?
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here. We do quite a bit, it turns out. The reason why I was attracted to Related is because they are really at the tip of the spear when it comes to forward-thinking energy management and sustainability generally in the real estate sector. It's a multifaceted real estate firm. We have a development division, a management company. We have leading-edge assets in each of the asset classes where they are located geographically. We have an affordable division that manages affordable housing. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. I'm housed in the development division. One of our big development projects that you may have heard of is called the Hudson Yards. It's a 26-acre, 13 million square foot mixed-use neighborhood that's going up north of Penn Station on the west side of Manhattan. There's a tremendous amount of efficiency opportunity inherent to a development of that scale. I'm also involved with 6 or 7 other development projects in the city, each one of which we have a commitment to achieving LEED Silver certification or better at a minimum. And the Vice President of Sustainability, Charlotte Matthews, for whom I work, and I are both very, very focused on enhanced energy performance in all of our assets. Even though I deal with development projects, I also have a foot in the management world and the affordable world where I do a lot of data analysis and talk about energy retrofit potential. So there's a lot of activity there. I think the specific projects, one by one, will sort of get teased out throughout the rest of the panel, but it's everything from combined heat and power or cogen plants to potentially renewable installations to advanced metering infrastructure to nuts and bolts efficiency strategies like lighting power densities and other things that we can get into.
How long has Related been focused on energy efficiency? I mean, one of the interesting questions that I think about is, this to me seems to be a relatively new phenomenon in the private development world. I mean, new being the last decade or so, but I'm curious about how long Related's been at this kind of thing. Rebecca, you think it's been going on for a long time?
I think so. I mean, we had.
I think we're the home of wasted energy, so it's a little hard for me to see.
We had programs in the 1990s. We had our first program actually in the 1970s, and those programs were taken up with great enthusiasm. The programs, ebb and flow over the years as funding and subsidies ebb and flow, but for those, I think, companies, and Luke can probably confirm this, that focus carefully on their bottom line and have carefully tied certain expenses, tied that back to the use of energy.
So I'm mistaken thinking this is a new thing. We've been
it
saving energy in America for generations.
We have, and if you actually look at the density of use, intensity of use, you will see that.
Let them come to Phoenix. Go ahead.
Yeah. So even though in the 70s Jimmy Carter was talking about efficiency carrying with it the moral equivalency of war, I think a little bit of that fortitude sort of dwindled in an intervening time period. But with the rise of green as being, having a lot of cachet, I think people are looking at it in a different way. I would echo Rebecca's point that energy management was just part and parcel with good building management. Before they just called it engineering, but now only since 2008 have we had a vice president of sustainability, and only since August have we had a team of sustainability people. Just because people manage buildings efficiently, though, or manage buildings well, doesn't mean that you're not tapping into all of the efficiency potential, because I think that there's always going to be a level of tension between the building operator being able to run a system knowing that it's going to serve the needs of the residents, and somebody who's pushing the ball forward down the field saying, I know that you want to run it this way, but if we try to look at it differently, there's a lot of upside there. And you just have to take the risk that deviating from the status quo is going to pay in energy savings and other upside.
Okay, thank you, Luke. John, so NYSERDA, we hear a lot about NYSERDA, those of us who are interested in energy in New York. How does NYSERDA approach these issues? And if you can, what are the major programs that NYSERDA has got underway for folks to hear about?
Sure. So, NYSERDA is probably a little bit in a unique position because we can take a very sort of broad approach to all the market interventions that need to take place in order to move efficiency through the marketplace in as smooth a way as possible. And I think it's one thing that we're constantly on top of in New York State policy setting is, what are the barriers that are preventing people from sort of just naturally adopting efficiency? I think that there's this sort of general sense that efficiency is, is a good economic value. It appeals to people's environmental values. But I think that there are still activities that need to take place in order to make sure that the marketplace is conditioned to be able to accept efficiency and then understand its full value. So that's kind of where NYSERDA tends to like to work. And so we have a number of different sort of programs that are touching on these various market interventions that can take place. And part of it deals with supporting some basic type of environmental or analytical research that needs to take place to reveal either what the economic or the environmental values are. That very much helps to inform, and NYSERDA will occasionally make recommendations to policy decision makers to ensure that we have a steady stream of programmatic incentives over time. As Rebecca was saying, we have in New York done a bit of the ebb and flow history. I think we've gotten to a point where we're looking at the need to maintain a steady state of efficiency funding on a going forward basis. And once we have that, the marketplace gets a higher level of confidence that it knows what's available to it, it knows how to structure its own business plans, it knows how to structure projects for their clients. So that policy and analytical foundation, I think, is a critical thing that NYSERDA has the luxury of being able to do. In addition, we're also looking at what are the next generation technologies we need to get into the marketplace. If we really look just at you know, what's being sold on the shelf in Home Depot. That's not going to get us to our long-term energy or environmental goals. So NYSERDA very much is interested in trying to work with small businesses, big businesses, to advance and accelerate the introduction of new efficiency technologies, new business practices, new kind of business models, in order to make sure that we're staying on a fairly aggressive track to meet long-term energy and environmental needs. And without that R&D function, it's going to make it very difficult for the state and for the country as a whole to really incorporate efficiency on a much more integrated basis day to day. We also do have, you know, so the R&D is on sort of the new technology side of the shop. We've got some very robustly funded what we call deployment programs. So we're in the marketplace pretty aggressively and looking to try to make sure that we are, you know, getting as many of the megawatt hours of energy savings as we can get. We've got some aggressive target goals, and NYSERDA's got some pretty strong goals to do that. So some of the programs, as Rebecca had said, as similar to Con Ed, we work across the whole spectrum of the energy-consuming public residential houses, commercial facilities, up to very large industrial clients, and looking for the potential opportunities that can make efficiency an attractive business proposition. At the end of the spectrum, you know, NYSERDA is also engaged in trying to make recommendations for the state that as we're doing we're moving the new technologies, we're getting the technologies in the marketplace, we've got to understand that eventually we need to raise the floor of efficiency in our economy generally. And we can do that, you know, through advocating for appliance standards, building codes, but the strongest motivator is even just to make sure that the economic equation for the efficient products and services actually makes sense over a sort of an old model. So NYSERDA does do a lot of work in trying to demonstrate what the value is in trying to raise the floor of efficiency, and then efficiency in its own becomes a self-sustaining activity on a going forward basis.
Thank you, John. So, Michael, what are they doing different in New Jersey? What's the Jersey approach to energy efficiency?
Oh, we always do everything differently, just to be out of sync with all the other 49 states. But no, you asked the question. First of all, thanks for inviting us here. It's a pleasure to be here. And
thank you for coming.
You asked the question, how long have we been doing this? So NYSERDA, California, a lot of states around the mid-'80s were the state energy offices. We've been doing energy efficiency programs since the mid-'80s. So, and have we done our job? Have we helped? Well, prior to that, if you look at the information, Energy Information Agency data in terms of energy use by consumers, that growth rate in the 60s, 70s was about a 7% growth rate. We were able to help with a lot of other things to sort of balance that curve. So you're talking now, depending on capacity or energy, you're in about a 1-2% growth curve. So we really have done our job, and we've done a number of things, but we have a ways to go in terms of always continually improving. But so in New Jersey, in terms of what we do, there's two ways you can do energy efficiency. You can do resource acquisition, or you can do market transformation. Market transformation gets you, well, in terms of stickiness, it gets you more in-depth energy savings, longer energy savings, people stay with it longer. Resource acquisition is what it sounds like. I have $1, I can give you $1, you're going to increase, you're going to put in a new piece of equipment, better lighting, better boilers, what have you, and I get to count that energy savings. While we're moving towards market transformation, but that's harder to actually measure and put that measure down. So when your boss's boss asks you, what did you do? It's real easy to say, I spent $1 million and I got you X amount of megawatt hours saved. So most of the times you're doing that balance between market transformation and resource acquisition. But when they ask you to count the beans, you're always doing resource acquisition. So in New Jersey, we have a funding level that we do every 4 years, so you have a sense of where you're going for a 4-year period of time. We're coming to the end of that in New Jersey. This year is our last last year in that 4-year funding level. We start a new process. We go out and we say we want to raise X amount of dollars over the next 4 years. This is what the rate impact is. And basically, that's where it's not how much energy can you save, but what is that balance between rate impact, because we're the Board of Public Utilities, we're always concerned about that, or our commissioners are. That's how they get on the board. And how much energy can you save? So our budget this year was $379 million. Our 4-year budget for the last 4 years was $1.2 billion. That investment returns an investment depending on whether you're on the residential, commercial, industrial side, either 4 to 1 or probably 8 or 9 to 1 on the commercial industrial side, depending on what we're doing. Last 8 years, from 2001 to 2008, there was $1 billion worth of investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy. So you can see how that budget's increased over time, and we'll probably be in that same area for the next 4 years. So we sort of split that money. Most of that money today goes into energy efficiency programs. Our renewable energy programs, we've transitioned those, might call them market transformation programs, but we've transitioned our renewable programs to survive in the marketplace just like any other energy program based on financing. We have a certificate program. You get a certificate, you generate a megawatt hour, you trade that in the market just like you trade air emissions. You get money for that, that finances projects. That's something we're all looking at doing in terms of energy efficiency. How can I play in the market? One of the things that happens when you have a budget and you have a large budget and states have to balance their budget, sometimes you have to donate some of your money to help to balance the state budget. So if you can play in an overall bigger market where the money isn't in a bucket, you're doing better than having to put that money into a bucket. So we split that money between different programs, between different markets, just like all the other programs, commercial, industrial, residential, low income, and then we have also, we do business market development, clean energy manufacturing fund, green growth fund, working with our economic development program. You can split that into basically 3 programs, 3 general programs. I'm going to give you a rebate to do a product. You're going to buy a dishwasher. We want you to buy the most efficient dishwasher. And then it's either construction or new construction. You're building something new. We want to get into that investment when you decide to do that. We want to give you money to make you not meet code, but to do something better than code. Take that step above code, and that's what John was talking about, always pushing that floor. That helps us. We basically push people along doing more than the code says, and then we come back around and say, hey, we should raise the code. And we're always in that balance between, we'll give you a little money, we'll get you to do something more that allows us to keep raising the code, and that's how we've actually lowered that curve from 7% to 1%. So we balance between new construction and retrofit. But that's where the sweet money, well, the sweet energy savings is in the retrofit. New construction, today new construction is pretty down in terms of the market, but it's the retrofit is where all that existing embodied energy is, and that's where we focus a lot of our programs. We have new transition programs called whole building approach. So we're not just trying to get you to replace a piece of equipment, we're trying to get you to look at it holistically and make that decision based on the whole building, and do that. You can do that over time, or you can do that all at once. So it's a balance between all of those programs.
Okay, well, let me turn to a specific question or an example. So last summer I was in my drugstore on the corner over here, and the druggist was telling me that her electric bills for her air conditioning is huge. She spends thousands of dollars on over the summer on her air conditioner, but it would cost her $15,000 to replace her air conditioner, and to do that, and she doesn't have the money to do that. If she were to replace it, she knows in a couple of summers it would pay for itself, but she has no way to make it happen. Do you guys have any way to help this druggist, this pharmacist in her store? I mean, what are you doing, I guess more specifically, what are you doing to help the parts of the economy like the small business person, like the residential homeowner or the tenant that doesn't have a stake but is spending a lot of their money on power? So we'll start with the state.
Well, we can't help your drugstore because we don't serve the business community in that market. So
okay, thanks. Let's go.
If you want to skip that, but certainly NYPA has a lot of challenges that speak directly to what you're talking about with various aspects of the market that have a difficult time justifying this, that they don't have that initial investment to make. And the public sector certainly is included in that. You know, budgets are constantly being cut, and every public facility has the challenges just keeping the lights on, much less making that investment. So NYPA's approach is that we, by providing 100% of the financing, there's no down payment. So they come to us, and if they're qualified to do work with us, then we provide 100% of the financing, and then it's paid back over time. And generally, it's paid back 5 to 10 years. So it's a long payback. We've also done even longer than that. So the markets that we serve then can benefit from really taking away that very initial hurdle, which is coming up with the cash and then waiting to be paid back.
Okay, well, how about Con Ed, Rebecca? Is there something you guys do?
So depending on the size of that business, let's assume it's a small business, because many of them are, and small by our standard is not measured by revenue but by use of electricity. Our small business program will give you 70% of the cost of that. So that's a lot of money. So if it's going to cost you $10,000, we'll give you $7,000. And you know, for the most part, we find that that is highly effective. There are some people who, you know, for whom the 30% is still problematic. We don't have financing. We've thought about how that might happen. There are other ways to do that. In California, for example, some small business programs give away 100% of the incremental cost of moving to high efficiency. That's highly effective. It doesn't then add to a company's leverage. You know, we've approached our regulator with that. That has not been so popular here in New York. But so we'll give you 70%. We'll give your druggist 70%.
Okay. Anybody else down here? Go ahead, John.
Well, I guess I'll just add on to it. So, you know, the 7,000 is a great thing. It addresses that sort of first cost barrier. That's a very traditional problem with energy efficiency. People don't have cash on hand, or they sort of certainly don't prioritize the investment that they make in energy efficiency above and beyond other investments that they might need to make in their lifestyles. So certainly getting money to the customer to get over that first market barrier is one thing. We can marry those programs with other financing mechanisms, I think, that Jill has called. And, you know, these packages of incentives, I think, is where the marketplace is sort of taking us. And we have to make those financing tools attractive to the customers. So, you know, there's a new pilot that NYSERDA is actually offering now. It's not going to necessarily help a pharmacist unless they're a pharmacist. We're going to the pharmacist's home. But there is going to be an ability to finance the remaining 30% on your electricity bill. So this prevents you from having to do an outlay of cash to pay for the loan to finance the remaining portion of the bill that's not met by the cost of the incentive. The loan is then paid back through your electricity bill. They will take a portion of the energy savings. If you had, you know, 10 kilowatt hours of energy consumed in a month, and now with your new air conditioner, you're only consuming 8 kilowatt hours. One of those kilowatt hours that you've saved, you may have to pay for to pay off the loan, and you get to keep the other 1 kilowatt hour as an energy cost savings to you. So you recognize immediately the cost benefit of the investment in energy efficiency. So that's certainly this on-bill financing mechanism. You know, there's been other types of platforms that have been tested. Mike and I were talking about PACE financing. This allows you to do that same type of financing activity through your property tax bill. In essence, you're just taking a new type of lien on your property, and through your property tax payments yearly, you're going to be paying off the loan based on the energy savings that you're realizing. That's had some problems down in Washington, but that looks like that may be beginning to break.
So that is sort of the change that you're going to see in a lot of state programs. New York's program, a lot of the Northeast program, our program is the transition of financing programs. With the infusion of ARA money, there was a lot of new financing programs that were tested out there. The DOE really wanted to see the revolving loan funds come into play in the states as they gave them the money, so the money can come back around. A lot of that is now being put into, you know, so they tested out some of those work through, and you'll see a lot of those on-bill financing is a creative way to do that. It's not financing, it's on-the-bill repayment. the key about financing is we're not a bank. I'm an energy wonk. I know what, here's a boiler, here's your lights. I know how to calculate the savings, real easy. We're not a bank, so we need to get into a structure where somebody else is doing that for us. The Economic Development Authority, there's a lot of talk in New Jersey about having a centralized bank for all of those incentives. They know how to do that. They're going to chase the people that aren't paying back the loan, all of that underwriting, evaluation. There's an interesting concept that we've actually talked to NYSERDA about, and talking about some questions. How do we work together? Well, we work very well. We borrow programs from all over the state. They borrow from us. It's free, no intellectual property rights. So NYSERDA has a program, and we're building on that, where you provide, and the key is in financing. The banks don't know anything about this stuff. For them, it's not, a mortgage. They know how to securitize that. They know what the assets are. Here's a boiler that you're going to put in somebody's house. If they don't pay the loan back, you're not going to take the boiler out. They're unsecured loans. They don't know anything about those energy calculations. You have to step in there and say, I have a process. I'm doing this modeling. I know what the performance is going to be. It's either Building Performance Institute on the home side. You give them a report and says, this is what the energy savings is. I did an audit. On the business side, it's walking through and doing an audit and showing them the calculations. Here's what the energy savings are. And some larger businesses, it's doing the modeling and making that performance and saying, here's what you're going to get in this structure. And then what we do is we provide that rebate to the bank. We say, here's the rebate we're going to give to the business under a direct install program, 70%. We want you to finance the rest. We'll give you 50% of that loan. You do all the underwriting. You pay us back over time. So we're just paying a bank a rebate. They're doing all the work. They're blending their rate of whatever it was. If it was 6%, they can lower that. They're getting their profit because of the rebate. We get a 0% interest paid back. We have we don't have the cost of having to be a bank, which gets to be very expensive. So there's all these creative financing structures that are going on. You match the direct install 70% with financing. It's almost a no-brainer, and I don't know how that pharmacy can turn that down at this point in time. 70% to, on all of that equipment upgrade, and a low-cost financing that's going to pay you back in 3, 4, 5 years. If you're not doing it now, it's, whatever.
Well, I'll check this summer to see if she gets the new air conditioner. But the thing, I guess, as you guys were talking, one of the things that was going through my mind is energy, as it's delivered locally, is an interesting industry. You have a private sector piece of it, highly regulated by a public utility commission, and you have all these government players, from government generators to government agencies and authorities, as in the kinds of organizations that you guys work for. And it seems to me, and then there's a whole range of other organizations like Related, or a company, I see some folks from here, Willdan Energy, that provides services directly to consumers and to business folks. In other words, you have a whole mix of different kinds of forms of organizations, utilities that are regulated, you have publicly owned, you have private, and you have this whole mix. It seems to me that we need to be thinking about the relative role of the public and the private sector in this part of the economy, and what's the proper role of government and the proper role of the private sector. I know in California, for example, John, there is no NYSERDA. They have, what they have is the utilities, in effect, play what Con Ed is doing now on energy efficiency has been done there for a generation. And I should mention, all of this is to spend money that comes from the ratepayers. We're the ones providing this in the first place, but there's different mixes of it. So I guess I'd like all of your views on, what should be the proper role of government and the private sector in energy efficiency. And I think to be fair, I'll start with somebody purely private sector these days who's been in the government. So Luke, why don't you start with that, and then I'll give John the hot seat for a while.
Well, first, I'm going to say that I think that it is the amount of support and funding and the forward-thinking policies of the greatest state in the union, New York, where we do a lot of development, have been just essential in helping us at Related be able to do new things and really dig into
So you guys planning to apply for some grant money? Is that what you're telling me?
Not me personally, as it turns out, but because there's a corporate directive, somebody will be getting NYSERDA money to do these development projects, because if you're building new buildings, they have a program called NCP, or if you're a multifamily building, maybe you want to do the multifamily performance program, which I used to run, and now they have in New Jersey called Pay for Performance. But yeah, I think it's essential. The public funding is essential. The question is, how much carrot do you need relative to how much stick do you want to bring to bear? And obviously, from the development side of the table, you'll get different answers depending on who you ask. Related is very clear in that we are an advocate for tougher energy codes, because we feel like you need to raise the bar on everybody. Now, I don't know if that is the answer from a policy perspective, because I'm not going to be so bold as to say that energy code doesn't result in better energy performance, but I'm not sure that it does in all cases. And that has to do with the way that you model performance relative to code and the way that you can apply code to different buildings. But yeah, my comment, having been at NYSERDA and now now that I'm not anymore, I think that I can. Your question was, in California, there is no NYSERDA. The utilities run the programs. In New York, you've got NYSERDA, which is like a central non-utility administrator of programs that works in the same space that Con Ed does to run ratepayer-funded
I guess what
programs.
I'm asking, John, do you want to go to work for Rebecca? That's my question.
I just think that when Spitzer came on with, and I'm sorry to go on and on, when Spitzer came on with the 15 by 15 energy policy, which said New York State is going to reduce electric consumption by 15% relative to a do-nothing scenario by the year 2015, they put into effect a thing called the Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard proceeding, which is what opened up program administration to the utilities alongside with NYSERDA. And the idea was you would have an all-hands-on-deck approach to procuring the resource of energy efficiency. And while I think that that sounded good when you say it, the problem with it is that it may be that whose hands on what deck is the real question, because too many hands on various decks may confuse the issue.
I was hoping for a little bit of a fight. So the question, John, is
he's really going there, isn't he?
Should you guys be doing this, or should Rebecca and Con Ed be doing it, or should you both be doing it, the way Spitzer was saying?
Yeah. So if we're going to do that, I mean, I was going to say, look, in a lot of respects, the government is turning to organizations like Con Edison, privately financed corporations, to serve as an arm of, implementing a government policy and to help achieve a public goal. Mm-hmm. Whether Con Ed is providing the outlet to get the needed investments completed, or whether NYSERDA is in there with its own programs that are providing those investments to get projects completed. I don't know that it really matters all that much. I think from this perspective, minus him, we're really all acting on behalf of trying to implement an overall state policy goal, whether it's on energy, environmental, or economic development grounds. I think from at least, I think Con Ed would say the same thing. What we are trying to do, however, is get the energy efficiency marketplace, a private marketplace, to take on the responsibility itself to find the value in those investments. And so what we're trying to foster is a business model that can provide a full spectrum of energy services to their clients, whether it's procuring electricity, whether it's providing energy efficiency services to get those bills down, perhaps whatever the on-site generation capabilities are. I think that this is where the private marketplace needs to start moving to, and that's what these programs, in some respect, are designed to try to get to. I think it's great to have resource acquisition. As Mike's saying, we do resource acquisitions. Con Ed's got it. NYPA's got it. The resource acquisition model serves a very valuable purpose in that it demonstrates, we can actually get energy savings in the system. But that market transformation approach, if you do lose that, I think, in the overall vision of your efficiency portfolio, you're just going to wind up spending an awful lot of money buying the same types of megawatt hours year after year after year. And I'll just go back to Steve. That has unfortunately wound up being the California system, and I think that they're beginning to see we need to roll back a little on that resource acquisition only model. And we need to figure out what are going to be the strategies we need to get into place. How does the government put those strategies into place so the private marketplace can come to it and engage in a longer-term viability of an energy efficiency industry going forward?
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm interested in Con Ed's perspective on, do you need NYSERDA out there doing this, or could you do this without?
I think you can divide the market in lots of ways. I'm sure, I'm happy to say we can do this without NYSERDA, but I don't think that's a productive conversation. I think they can do it without us. What NYSERDA can do that any given utility cannot do is market transformation, because they can address a broader scope. They can say to a manufacturer of X, let's say smart strips, which is probably the next CFL, right? We want to make sure that this becomes a standard device that everybody can buy at a reasonable price, and we want everybody's audiovisual system to be, using a smart strip. We want everybody's computer systems to be using a smart strip, and that will help drive down energy use. But the smart strip is expensive. It's $40. It's $45. But when you can do market transformation, you can drive the cost of that down to $20, and then people will buy it. And that's certainly what happened with compact fluorescence, and that happened in California, when the utilities worked together to, in fact, drive the cost of CFLs down on the shelves of Home Depot. That has happened in New York, where NYSERDA has helped drive the cost of CFLs down at Home Depot. So there's a very good role for entities that can look across jurisdictions, because all utilities have service territories in which we operate, and we do not operate outside those territories. What government and quasi-governmental agencies cannot do is run the electric system. And so for those of us who run a system and run it pretty well, pretty highly reliable, what we can do is take into account in our build the efficiency and the demand management. And when you start to think about what that means, it has some important benefits. For example, everybody who pays an electric bill pays a surcharge. That surcharge funds many things: my programs, NYSERDA's programs, renewable programs, RGGI, all kinds of stuff. But one might say, does that money always come back from Albany in the way that it goes up? Probably not. But what I can do is say, gee, even though you weren't in a program and didn't get the benefit of that surcharge, if I build less, your rates will increase less or not increase. And that's a benefit to the entire rate base that an agency that does not run a system, or that anybody who actually doesn't run the system, cannot do. And then the second point is, for the private contractors like the Wildans and the Lockheed Martins and the Honeywells, they are not in this market without either NYSERDA or us. So let's be clear about this. Their annuity comes from the surcharge that you all pay on your bills, and that is then funneled into programs, and we all hire people to help us administer those programs and to go out and to knock on the door and to talk to your pharmacist and to install that equipment.
Okay, sounds good. I want to turn to one last question before getting some questions from the audience, and we'll start with you, Jill. I'd like you to tell me one really great story or program on energy efficiency from your own place or from your own experience that you think really needs to be told to this group and on forward. So just come up with a nice story, and then we'll get into some discussion with the audience.
Okay. Well, I think instead of picking one specific installation or, dollars saved and megawatt hours saved and megawatts shaved, and I think everybody here can tell one of those, I'll use this opportunity to talk about how New York is right now really looking forward with energy efficiency. And just last month, the governor has announced an initiative for public buildings to do master planning of energy efficiency. So right now, everyone's doing these programs here or there. Some agencies are more advanced than others. They're more forward-thinking. Others have really not started to worry about this issue. And so from a state directive now, the agencies through NYPA, and we'll be working with NYSERDA, but really at the direction of the governor's office, have been asked to do energy efficiency master planning with an objective to spend about $500 million in the next 4 years, and that we'll be funding projects that have a return on investment of 10% or greater. So it's really trying to look at what is the smart investments, what are the investments that need to be made, and then how do we do this where we're affecting a major energy consumer in the state, which is state agencies. So that's my exciting story.
You. Rebecca, something exciting from Con Ed.
So I could tell you about some exciting modeling we're doing, but I won't do that.
Some of the people here would find that
exciting.
exciting.
Yeah, actually, this is probably the right group in which to do that. So we had a great customer, a small business customer called Mrs. Maxwell's Bakery out on East New York, Brooklyn. And if you haven't been there, it is now my bakery of choice, and they're amazing. And we went in and had a great story with them. I've forgotten exactly how much they've cut their electric bills by, but it was tremendous. And they did that by putting in new lighting everywhere. And part of that new lighting, and it's a very important part, was in their display cases for cakes. And that's a great, it's lighting that is a great application for LEDs. And everybody hears about LEDs, the next great thing. Certainly, like all lighting application is everything. Not every lamp is good for every application. But here was an example of a small company, many generations in New York, successful in a neighborhood that is not an easy neighborhood. And they took the plunge. They laid out a pretty significant investment. We gave them a big incentive, and they have had a much lower electricity bill, and they have display cases that look great, and foyer that looks great, and it's a great story.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Luke.
Sure, I have a couple of stories. One is when I was helping to run the multifamily performance program, we finished a job out in Brooklyn, and the building got a call from National Grid to say, oh, we're going to come and swap out your gas meter because it's not working anymore. So they did, but it turned out that the gas meter was actually working, just moving less gas through it because we had saved 45% of their heating fuel. A similar story happened in Buffalo, New York, when we retrofit a building, the first one to complete our program, and the oil vendor thought that the building owner was angry at him all winter because he didn't call for an oil delivery. Another good story. So, I mean, my final story is that the other week I was in a meeting where some representatives from Related Management Company came to talk to us about the electricity bills at a building called MIMA, which is our new development on 42nd and 10th. It's 1.2 million square feet. It has 3 theaters and a hotel and 900,000 square feet of residential containing 814 apartments. And they slapped a printout of all of because it's sub-metered, we have access to the amount of energy use in each of the apartments correlated to the dollar value. And they said, we're a little concerned that these numbers are so low. Something must be wrong. It turns out that building was 21.4% better than code, and it has condensing equipment, it has sub-metering, it has all Energy Star appliances, it has hybrid heat pump technology, it has heat recovery ventilators, it has heat exchangers between the domestic hot water system and the condenser water loop. It has all this awesome stuff. So it kind of makes sense that that results in low bills for the residents. And
Great.
so that was a good story.
Sounds good. John, something from your experience?
Yeah, so I think I'm like Rebecca. I do a lot of exciting modeling work, and I file a really good petition with the Public Service Commission when necessary. So, but I think, the one thing, I'll sort of take Jill's approach, that, the exciting thing that we were able to accomplish within the past year with the Public Service Commission is to get acceptance that we need to take our programs in a little bit of a different direction. And we are going to be engaging in an advanced buildings initiative that is going to be creating wide-scale demonstration projects of either technologies that we know are sort of just sitting on the shelf, but for some reason the marketplace hasn't really picked them up yet, but we know that their energy efficiency potentials are very, very high. Or we're even going to be able to take funds and test market technologies which are perhaps a little bit early stage. So this idea that we're going to be able to use the New York marketplace as a sort of a laboratory for accelerating technologies in energy efficiency, I think is going to be something of a first way of approaching this in the country. And we're going to be looking at this kind of new generation of project and new generation type of program approach and see where we can take it. And there seems to be a lot of promise that way. So it's kind of the new era of efficiency is sort of coming in on its way.
Thank you, John. So, Michael, other than winning Super Bowls, what other exciting news do you have for us from New Jersey?
Being a Jets fan, I don't know about winning. It was good. I watched it. I was rooting for somebody to lose. That's for those Giant fans out there. But only one. There's hundreds of them, and I'm sure you have them. It's great when Cosmere, which is in Ford's, New Jersey, Middlesex, they make Estee Lauder. Their management team said, we're moving to South America. We're going to move the processing line. And you're able to get in there with the facility processor and lower their costs, do all the things, just, lighting, upgrades, enthalpy recovery, all of the things that we have in our bag of tricks. After a year and a half, they decided they're not moving, they're staying in Ford's, and you saved all those jobs, and that's fantastic. Even on top of that, so those are the sort of not standard, you do that every day, and it's great that you can save those jobs. Mannington Mills in South Jersey, Mannington, New Jersey, named after them, they do flooring. Same thing. They were invested there. They're talking about moving. They have to compete with everybody else. It's a global marketplace. We were able to get in there with the utility and do a lot of things on their processing line, their chemical processing line, which is custom measured. This is not off the shelf LED lights or motors or what have you. So it takes a lot of work to be able to do that. We work with the gas utility to bring in a CHP operation, piled on incentives, and they're staying in Mannington Mills, and you're saving all of those jobs, and they're going to be there for the long term. So those are the kind of things that you're able to do, and just helping to move the governor's strategic plan and economic development along. So and matching up the environmental benefits on the other side. It's nice stuff.
Thank you. Those are some great stories. What I'd like to do now is turn to the audience. We have time for about 2 or 3 questions. And let me give you a couple of rules for questions. They're questions. I'd like them to be questions to 1 or 2 of the panelists. Not speeches, not statements, not declarations, but questions. If you can't ask a question, we are going to have a very nice reception afterwards. All the panelists and I will be back there. We'll all be talking. You can give all the speeches you want then. But now let's try to focus on a couple of questions while we still have a little bit of time. There's microphones over here. Okay, Nathan, just pick somebody. Okay.
One of the things you talked about, I think, was demand management and demand shift to different times. I wonder how big of a role time-based metering will play. And if so, how quickly do you feel like that might come to New York, and how quickly are the different markets, residential, commercial, industrial?
Okay.
Time-based metering is already in New York. Every customer that has monthly demand in excess of 500 kilowatts a month, and that's probably soon going to be lowered to 300, is on a tariff called mandatory hourly pricing, so they get an hourly price. In New York State, utilities may not impose any kind of interval pricing on residential customers as a matter of state law. what you also have to then layer on to this is that in New York we have full retail choice. And you may leave your utility and buy your commodity from any retail provider, and that retail provider can provide you with a fixed cost contract. Now, granted, that's a hedge, and of course the price of that hedge will, will be driven by the volatility, your use, whatever, but you will face a fixed price. I think it is true at Con Edison, and I'm not in that group, but I think this is right, that when we first saw our largest customers go to mandatory hourly pricing, the vast majority of them moved to energy services companies and paid a fixed price contract.
Okay, let's take a question from this side over here.
We're doing something cool with demand management. Can I just mention it really quick?
Quickly, yeah.
We're retrofitting our office space in the Time Warner Center. We have 3 or 2.5 floors in the Time Warner Center, and there's a company called Lutron that we're working with to install a wireless LED integrated shading technology system that raises and lowers and dims depending on the daylight capacity. And because it's wireless, it can be controlled centrally or remotely from anywhere that you want with an iPad. So if there were going to be a demand response event, we could actually lower light levels, they say, by 30% without anybody in the office even noticing from any location anywhere in the world. So we're piloting this technology to install it at the Hudson Yards so that we can have this very interactive, very nimble system.
We used to call that a haunted house, Luke. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much for, hello. Thanks very much for your time, first of all. But obviously, especially that last question from Steve, brought up how there's just so many positive things going on for everyone involved in efficiency measures, from ratepayers to utilities to private companies. And I guess maybe for Luke and Michael from the public and private sector, why isn't this front page news? Why isn't every business owner running out and taking advantage of these amazing programs? What's stopping, stopping private citizens from taking advantage of the gifts from Con Ed and other great opportunities to do that?
Anybody? John, go ahead. Oh, Mike, you have one too? Go ahead.
Well, and if we could figure that out, we would be, no.
But then you'd be out of business.
Yeah, right. But that would be good. And that's what we're striving for. So why isn't it front page news? It's the boring stuff. It's, the front page news is the solar that I put on my roof and the ribbon cutting for that new technology. To put a boiler in your basement or, upgrade the lighting is not, a ribbon cutting type of activity. The Mannington Mill folks, they actually came in to talk about changing their rate structure, and we got them to, let's do a walkthrough with you. We have TRC came down and sat down and worked with them. So they changed from saying, we got to change the rate structure after we did all this, to being the biggest advocate. They're out there talking about this. They're becoming LEED certified, all of that. So they become our advocates and get out there to do that. If you can figure out how to make a ribbon cutting for a boiler sexy, we would.
Gotta love that. Yeah. So I'll take a little bit of a different approach on it. Rather than it just be boring, I think what we're seeing is that efficiency to most people is invisible. Actually, it's not even efficiency. I think our energy use is invisible. People have no awareness, cognizance, understanding of energy systems. Where does our electricity come from? And people, frankly, don't always care. And so they're not always aware of what their effects are, or what our lifestyle effects are on the environment generally, or that there may be a lower cost alternative to, just sort of taking things as the status quo. So a challenge in energy efficiency that we're trying to look at are what are the various types of behavioral mechanisms that we might be able to pull on when we're trying to make offerings of energy efficiency programs generally to the public, when we're recounting of success stories and trying to see how do you make that invisible, somewhat more visible, or how do you raise the cognizance awareness of the public generally. I think once that starts to happen, then I think you see the public face of it will start to take on probably a little bit stronger.
So let me take one more question. Go ahead, pick anybody.
Hi, I have another question about demand response, actually, but from an emissions perspective. Now, are there any controls to monitor or to understand the emissions that happen when you move to a backup source of generation in a demand response program?
All generators have to meet the requirements of New York State. I think that for diesel generators, those requirements are pretty substantial and place a fairly substantial cap on the runtime. And you probably know better than I. It's not a demand response.
No.
My programs let you participate, although we don't let diesel participate much anymore. We'd rather see kind of load curtailment.
Yeah. I guess this winds up being somewhat of a policy conundrum because, some of these kind of dirty diesels have been in the marketplace for quite a while, and a lot of kind of system preparedness has taken account of that. So I think the challenge really becomes how do we effectuate the turnover of those dirtier systems so that we can actually wind up with cleaner on-site generation alternatives, whether it's for peak or pricing hedging purposes, or whether it's just to provide generic load to a facility. So I guess that's what I would say. Most of those facilities are known. DEC does track their runtime, extrapolates emissions, but how that's I don't know that that's necessarily effectuating policy, other than I think we need to approach sort of these on-site generation equipment differently.
It's probably something that Jonathan, if he was here, would probably be. It's more in the it's playing well with the utility on the other question. It's playing well with the Department of Environmental Protection in that partnership. So making fuel cells and CHP, which are very more efficient, have less permit barriers, get them into the marketplace faster, help to incentivize those things, reduce the barriers on the technology, regulatory side, and try to do what John said, shift over that marketplace to clean generation, and again, keep working with the DP. They do have sort of limits on those generators, and we abide by that. So.
Although I think it should also be noted that when you get to those minimal hours on the load duration curve where you're at system peak, the generators are calling all assets available, and those are the end of the loading order, the dirtiest plants that they have available from which to generate power. So it becomes the dirtiest time of the year for the generators. And so even if you have some of the distributed generators also being dirty, I think you're probably still getting a net win off of the curtailment program.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the more interesting issue with demand response and emissions. And in New York City in particular, where certain peaking units, while I think they're not dirty, they're not combined cycle. So they're single cycle, they're not taking advantage of a second cycle to in fact use fuel more efficiently. There are many constrained areas where peaking units run regardless of whether you're at peak. And so to be able to shave the peak permanently, actually, if you could do it enough in the right place, could actually, theoretically have a fairly material impact on emissions, because those generators would not run. It's in a perfect world, the loading order is set, but constraints change that. And so resolving some of those constraints through demand management or otherwise can have a big impact.
Thank you, Rebecca. What I want to do now is give each of our panelists a very brief concluding note. In other words, is there something about energy efficiency you think the audience really must hear before we start drinking? As I always want to make sure we don't leave something unsaid. So Jill, we're going to start with you and go right down the line here.
So it'll be very brief in that case.
Almost like a toast, if
yes.
you will.
I think what the next important part of energy efficiency is integrating it with all of a capital improvement, not just going into a building and saying, I'm going to just change out this boiler, but what's the whole investment that's being made, and then being able to plan energy efficiency when you're planning capital or major O&M improvements anyway, so that you're not just trying to make the business case on the one improvement. That's
Thank
my
you.
toast.
Rebecca.
Mine would be that I think the best thing that could happen to energy efficiency is actually a price on carbon, so that we stop a ridiculous contrived subsidy scheme and pay a price for an impact on the environment, whether that's on water or air or otherwise, and you wouldn't have contrived programs.
You've got support here for that. Luke?
Yeah, I mean, people in the audience who have taken my class or taken it, I have to apologize because you will have heard this, but I think that as long as, and this is not supposed to be pessimistic, as long as there needs to be programs to facilitate people's access to efficiency interventions, I think it's going to be an uphill battle. But if we can crack the nut that provides the power of individuals to do this without prompting, without incentive, then we can really make a lot of forward motion. And I think the analogy that I will just say before I stop speaking is that before people had the internet, they liked to read the encyclopedia, and then after it was invented, they spontaneously wanted to write it for free on Wikipedia. And it's that sort of changing the dynamic, either through access to information. I believe that access to people's data will be the thing that helps us get there, which is why Rebecca's had to listen to me talk about data access over and over and over and over and over again. But I really think that that's an important thing.
John?
So I guess I would agree with all of this, and I guess the only thing I would add on top of this is, patience is a virtue with efficiency, and I think we have to realize that efficiency is going to have the greatest effect over the longer term. And I agree that there may be sort of these structural changes that need to happen in our economy. There may be systematic approaches that can happen, but there's always going to be something, I think, that's going to constantly be coming along that's going to need some level of support before it is ultimately adopted by the marketplace generally. So efficiency is going to be more of an evolutionary process than it's going to, I think, ultimately just wind up in this revolution where we're going to have this wonderfully efficient economy. It's going to be a bit of a process in order to kind of get to where we need to be.
Michael?
So the best thing, coming up with a new and innovative model that, no, I just did. No sense of humor. So there's a lot of things, just to pick one. So probably heresy to the electric utilities, but so you're looking at natural gas. There's so much in the Marcellus Shale. Natural gas supplies are going to be increasing. Prices coming down. It's the lowest it's been in forever. It just came from $13 an MMBTU. It's now what? They're giving it away at $3, $4 an MMBTU. So, and at the same time, we just raised the standards for boilers and furnaces. So the cost savings that you can get out of this is probably going to make that cost-effective energy efficiency on the heating side a little difficult to get. But the bright side, you just rate on demand response. So what we're pushing, looking out ahead, and you're always got to be doing this. So where is that next market that I can play with? So low gas prices, CHP. We have 17 of the 20 largest pharmaceutical food processing facilities in New Jersey. So CHP is going to help them develop an energy efficiency response within their building, heating, cooling, air conditioning, keeping those jobs going in the state of New Jersey. So that's what we always play with, is always looking at the market's always going to change. What do you have in your toolbox that can help your businesses or the residents stay? And you're always going to be changing those programs as the market changes. So.
Okay. I want to thank the panel for a great conversation. Thank you.